12 people walked into the old theater that night, laughing, checking their phones, carrying paper cups and greasy paper bags. None of them knew the man in the booth had been planning this moment for years. He had watched them come and go. He had learned their habits. He had waited for the last one to step inside. The building sat where it always had, hunched at the corner like a tired animal. The marquee buzzed, half its bulbs dead. A thin line of neon stuttered above the door and spelled the same promise over and over. Free screening. Tonight only. The letters hummed through dust and rain scars, a soft lure on a quiet street. People drifted in for the memory of it. The price of a story felt like nothing when it was free. Inside, the lobby smelled of damp carpet and old sugar. Posters from another decade slouched in their frames. The ticket booth glass wore fingerprints that no one had cleaned in years. No clerk waited. No ropes guided anyone where to stand. Just the low rattle of an air vent and the faint scrape of shoes on tile. It felt familiar enough to be safe. They scattered the way small-town crowds always do. A teenager with tangled headphones tugged at the cord and slid into a seat 2 rows from the back. A young mother settled in the middle and passed popcorn to her daughter with the small hands. A man in a work jacket rubbed his neck and sank into the aisle seat. 2 friends whispered and laughed, their voices bouncing off the worn velvet. An older couple took the 3rd row and laced their fingers as if they had done it here 100 times. Above them, the square window of the projection booth was a dark mouth. Dust floated in the cone of light that leaked from the hallway. The red curtain hung heavy and damp, stitched in places where the fabric had torn. The armrests clicked softly when people shifted. The theater seemed to hold its breath. House lights dimmed without a warning, not a gentle fade, a drop. Conversations broke in the middle of sentences. A few phones rose like tiny lighthouses, then blinked off as their owners remembered where they were. The machine in the booth coughed and caught. A thin white beam cut the darkness and drew a bright rectangle on the screen. The room settled into the old posture of movie night, eyes forward, voices low, hands still. Then the screen showed the lobby they had just walked through, grainy pale. The camera angle was high and strange. The sound was only the steady tick of the reel. A figure came into frame, younger and thinner by a few years. He set a soda on the counter, leaned, grinned, said something they could not hear. The man in the work jacket leaned forward, squinted, and stopped breathing for a beat. It was him, his face, his jacket from a season long gone, his mouth pulling into that same quick smile. He watched himself laugh at something out of sight. Someone in the back row snorted and then swallowed the sound. Another said that it had to be part of the show. The young mother gave the bag of popcorn a quick shake as if a new handful could reset the evening. In the hallway behind the last row, metal kissed metal, a small, clean click. The sort of sound a lock makes when it finds home. No one turned to look. The reel jumped. A night packed with people rattled onto the screen. The picture had torn, the audience had groaned, and the old projectionist had stepped into the aisle, hands unsteady, trying to coax the film back to life. The lens did not care about the jam. It cared about faces. It visited each row and lingered on mouths bent into smirks, on eyes rolled in bored contempt, on the quick shake of a head that says, "Hurry up." Some of those faces sat here again now, their noses a little sharper, their hair a little thinner, the shapes of them more tired but still themselves. The projector hummed like a slow heartbeat. The dust in the beam turned and turned. The curtain breathed. A bag of candy dropped somewhere and skittered under a seat. No one laughed. The teenager stopped tapping his foot. The friends in the back went quiet. The older couple let their hands fall apart. Another cut. The frame narrowed to the edge of a concession stand and held there. A hand appeared with a rag. An old man wiped at a spill he had not made. Voices outside the shot snickered. A shoulder bumped him as someone passed. The camera waited and recorded the small flinch he thought no one noticed. It felt like a memory had grown teeth. The young mother folded the popcorn closed and did not let it go. The man in the work jacket sat forward with his elbows on his knees. The teenager pulled the cord from his ear and listened to the room instead. Someone reached for the glowing exit sign and watched it gutter and die. Air moved across the seats in a slow draft, as if the building itself had exhaled. The click came again, softer now, swallowed by the hum of the machine. The doors at the back would not open anymore. The aisle lights along the carpet winked out one by one. The beam on the screen widened and washed the room in pale light. It caught the floating dust and made it glitter like a warning. On the screen, the lobby returned. The angle changed. A child pointed at the old projectionist behind the glass and mimicked the tremble of his hands. Two boys laughed into a phone and watched their own joke back a second later. A manager leaned close to the booth window and spoke with his jaw tight. The camera never blinked. It collected every look, every small act that had felt light to the person doing it and heavy to the person receiving it. The theater listened to itself, to breathing, to the shift and squeak of old springs, to the whisper of fabric as people moved slower than they meant to. What had worn the familiar mask of a free night out was no longer wearing it. The screen flashed white. The hum held. The room was still. For a heartbeat it felt like the machine in the booth and the people in the seats were waiting for the same cue. They were not. What they thought was nostalgia was not nostalgia at all. It was a final performance years in the making, and tonight the curtain was only just rising. Walter Hensley had worked in the theater for more than 40 years. By the time he was 65, most people in town called him the ghost of the projection booth. He rarely left the building. He rented a small room in the back, a cot pressed against the wall, a kettle blackened from years of use. The air smelled of old reels, chemical, and dust. The hum of the projector was the rhythm of his days and nights. He was thin, his shirt always one size too large, sleeves rolled back, collar gray with wear. His hands shook slightly, not from age but from habit. He spent hours splicing film, trimming frames with scissors dulled from overuse. The scraps lay scattered on the floor like shed skin. He never spoke much. When he did, it was low, quick, and often ignored. People remembered the mistakes. They remembered the night the reel jammed during a Friday premiere. The lights went dark, the screen froze, and the audience groaned. Someone whistled, others laughed. Walter stood in the aisle, fumbling with the projector, sweat shining on his forehead. The manager barked orders in front of everyone. "Hurry up, you're embarrassing us." The words cut louder than the laughter. The crowd clapped when the film returned, but they were not clapping for him. They were clapping against him. Teenagers caught him on camera once, sitting alone in the lobby during intermission, eating a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. They whispered, filmed him chewing, uploaded the clip. The video spread through the school. He never mentioned it. He kept sweeping the popcorn, changing the reels, avoiding their eyes when they came back for another matinee. Inside the projection booth, boxes lined the walls. Cardboard cracked from humidity, edges torn. Each box held film reels, some commercial prints, some personal. The handwriting on the labels was shaky but deliberate. Titles crossed out, replaced with names. A few were marked with single words: laughed, fired, mocked. At the bottom of the stack sat a reel with a label written in fading black ink: final screening. The booth itself was a cage of light and shadow. The bulb was old, buzzing, ready to die. The shutters rattled with every frame. The smell of burning dust filled the air when the machine ran too long. Walter sat in the chair behind the glass, his silhouette invisible to the crowd below. He controlled the flicker, the sound, the pace of every story shown on the cracked screen. They never saw him. They only saw what he projected. The manager who once shouted at him had moved on years ago. The audience who laughed had forgotten. The students who filmed him had grown, left town, started other lives. Walter had stayed. He carried their voices like scratches on celluloid, permanent, impossible to erase. He kept the reels in order, stacked by year, each marked, each waiting. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite. He nodded when spoken to, said thank you when change was handed over at the store. No one invited him to barbecues. No one remembered his birthday. His rent was always on time, his bills paid in cash. He disappeared into the booth at dusk and left at dawn. To them he was invisible. To himself he was the man who held the switch that could plunge the room into silence. Over the years people stopped noticing him. They noticed the screen. They noticed the sound. They noticed the escape of 2 hours in the dark. Walter was the hand unseen, the presence behind the light. In the end, he understood what that meant. If the story could make them laugh, it could make them scream. If the real could hide his mistakes, it could reveal their faces. The booth was not only a workplace, it was a stage, and he was the one left to decide what played. At the back of the room, beside the cot, the reel marked final screening rested against the wall. The tape was brittle, edges worn, but the label was clear. It waited under layers of dust, untouched, ready for the night when the curtain fell for the last time. Walter Hensley had spent his life unseen, but he was the storyteller in the shadows, and now the story would be his. The theater filled slowly, seat by seat. At 7 p.m., the marquee still buzzed in weak neon, its red letters bleeding through a light mist. A woman arrived with her daughter, the child clutching a bag of candy as large as her hands. The woman's coat smelled faintly of detergent and rain. She guided the girl to the middle row, brushing dust from the seat before letting her sit. The child laughed at the echo of her voice in the wide, empty hall. No one noticed the faint smell of mildew that lingered under the perfume of popcorn oil. A group of 4 young men stumbled through the doors not long after. Their shoes squeaked on the cracked linoleum. One carried a soda cup, already dripping along the side, leaving a trail toward the carpet. They laughed loudly, shoving each other, voices bouncing between the peeling walls. They spread across the back row, legs stretched, sneakers balanced on broken armrests. Their laughter rose each time the projector hummed above, as if mocking the old machine. At 7:15 p.m., an older man shuffled in. His jacket was wool, too heavy for the season, with patches worn smooth at the elbows. He carried a small notebook in his hand, one he checked before sliding it into his pocket. He lowered himself into a seat in the second row, his breathing audible in the silence that followed the group's noise. He coughed once, covered his mouth, and looked straight ahead, waiting for the lights to dim. The doors opened again. A couple entered together, their steps aligned, their hands brushing at the seams of their coats. They chose a corner near the exit sign that flickered. The woman leaned her head on the man's shoulder. They whispered, their voices too low to catch, their movements small in the wide shadow of the theater. The faint smell of cigarette smoke clung to their clothes, mixing with the dust and stale air. One man arrived late. He moved with the authority of someone who had once given orders in this same building. Years ago, he had stood at the front and directed others, his voice sharp, his finger pointing toward the projection booth. Tonight, he bought no ticket. He simply pushed the door open, his shoes tapping against the tiles as if the place still belonged to him. He took a seat near the aisle, crossing his legs, adjusting his tie, glancing once toward the booth window. The glass gave nothing back. Another figure followed. A woman with sharp eyes, her hair tied back, her walk quick. She carried no concessions, no bag, only her own presence. Years earlier she had raised her voice in the theater, loud enough for the crowd to hear, when the film stalled and the lights faltered. She had laughed then, her words sharp, her hand gesturing toward the man fumbling with the reels. Tonight she walked past the others and chose a seat close to the front, crossing her arms as if guarding herself from the cold air drifting from the vents. The group of young men in the back row noticed her. They smirked, whispered, remembered their own nickname for the one who used to linger in the lobby. They had called him the old fool, the crazy man who never spoke. They had shouted it down the aisle once, their laughter louder than the film. The echoes of that night still rested in the walls, unseen but not unheard. By 7:30 p.m., 12 people sat scattered in the theater. Their shapes were small under the high ceiling. Dust floated in the beams of the side lights. The seats creaked when they shifted. A faint hum rose from the booth above, steady, unbroken like a second heartbeat in the room. The air was damp, heavy with age. The screen loomed blank, waiting. They looked ordinary. A mother, a daughter, young men restless with energy, an old teacher, a couple in silence, a manager once in charge, a woman who had mocked in public, a group that had ridiculed in whispers. To each other they were strangers. To the theater, they were customers. To the man in the booth, they were names on a list. The soda from the back row tipped, spilling slowly across the floor. The liquid reached the base of a seat, sticky against the carpet. The sound went unnoticed by most, drowned under the low buzz of the neon outside. The mother shifted in her seat, the child tugging at her sleeve, asking when the film would start. The old teacher adjusted his glasses. The couple held hands tighter. The woman in the front tapped her foot, impatient. The manager leaned back, arms folded, eyes fixed on the dark window above. The projector light blinked once, a flicker against the white screen. It held for a second, then died again. The crowd murmured softly, then quieted, waiting. In the booth, shadows moved. No one below noticed. The room returned to stillness, broken only by the creak of chairs and the faint cough of the machine preparing itself. From the lobby came the echo of the door clicking shut. The sound was small, metallic, final. Inside, the air seemed to grow heavier. No one looked back. No one stood. They stayed where they were, scattered across the rows, unaware that their gathering was not chance. They were not an audience. They were cast. The reel was ready. The stage was set. The list was complete. At 7:45 p.m., the theater lights dimmed as expected. A low murmur rippled through the rows. Popcorn shifted in paper bags. The girl in the middle row leaned against her mother, waiting for the first flicker of the feature. The old teacher coughed into his sleeve. The couple adjusted in their seats. The young men at the back row laughed quietly, mocking the stillness. For a moment, it felt like any other screening in a worn-down cinema. The hum of the projector rose. A vibration carried through the floorboards, subtle but present, like the beat of a hidden engine. The booth window above reflected nothing but shadow. The audience sat in the glow of faint house lights, eyes fixed on the blank screen. Then the bulbs cut, total darkness. The exit sign flickered once, then died. A woman in the front row gasped. The sound was sharp in the heavy silence. One of the young men muttered, his voice too soft to carry. The girl clutched her mother's sleeve. The teacher shifted in his seat, his notebook sliding from his pocket to the floor. The couple sat motionless, their faces hidden by shadow. In the back row, a soda cup tipped, the liquid spilling, sticky against the carpet. The scent of syrup rose, mingling with the damp smell of old fabric. Someone stood, pushing against the aisle. Their shoes scuffed against the tiles. The emergency door groaned as the handle was pulled. It didn't give. A second pull, harder. Nothing. The door was sealed. Man tried again. The handle clicked but did not move. He let go. The sound of his breathing reached those closest to him. In the dark, it sounded louder, heavier, pressed tight by the silence around it. Another patron turned toward the main doors at the back. The frame rattled under his weight, but the lock held. The wood groaned but did not open. He pushed again, shoulders slamming into the surface. The noise echoed through the empty hall, but the door stayed closed. The sound faded. Only the hum of the projector remained, low, steady, deliberate. A chair cracked. In the aisle, a seat had collapsed, blocking the passage. The metal bent in, twisted, forming a barrier. When a patron tried to lift it, the frame caught against the floor, wedged tight. The smell of rust filled the air as hands scraped against the surface. The obstacle held. The aisle was sealed. The laughter from the back row stopped. Their voices dropped to whispers. They shifted in their seats, the sound of fabric brushing against fabric. No one shouted. No one ran. They waited. The hum above grew louder, a mechanical cough from the projector straining against its age. Then the beam hit the screen. The first image was not Hollywood. It was not a title sequence. It was grainy, washed in gray light. The shot was of the same theater years earlier. The frame shook slightly as if filmed by hand. A younger crowd filled the seats. Their faces were clear, their laughter louder than the soundtrack. The film froze on one frame, a projectionist fumbling with a reel, sweat on his brow. The crowd jeered. The screen froze on their laughter, mouths open, eyes glinting. In the present, those same faces sat below, staring up at themselves. The mother pulled her daughter closer, her arm wrapped tight. The old teacher leaned forward, his glasses sliding down. His eyes locked on the screen, his jaw tight. The couple sat rigid, the woman's hand pressed into the man's arm. The young men shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter replaced by silence. One muttered a curse under his breath. The sound of kernels hitting the floor broke the moment. A bag of popcorn slipped from someone's hands, scattering across the aisle. No one laughed. The reel changed. Another frame. A woman standing in the front rows, her finger pointed toward the booth, her mouth open mid-laugh. The same woman sat there tonight, arms crossed, staring up at her younger self. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She did not speak. The machine clicked. The image cut again. Now a group of teenagers laughing in the lobby, phones raised, a man captured mid-bite on his sandwich. The audience recognized the moment. They had been the ones laughing, filming, posting. The video had spread. Their faces glowed on the screen, larger than life. In the back row, the group fell into silence. One tapped his foot nervously against the floor. The sound echoed in the empty space, rhythmic, unsteady. The projector coughed again. The film jumped. The manager appeared next, shouting across the aisle, his hand raised, his mouth open in mid-command. The crowd in the old footage clapped when the lights returned. The screen froze on their applause. The same man sat tonight near the aisle, his tie loosened, his face pale in the glow. He adjusted in his seat but did not look away. The air in the theater grew heavier. The smell of dust and burnt wiring drifted from the booth. The sound of the reels turning filled the silence between breaths. The temperature felt colder, as if the room itself had been drained of warmth. People shifted in their seats, coats pulled tighter, hands gripping armrests slick with age. The girl whispered to her mother, asking what was happening. The mother hushed her. The sound was quick, clipped, functional. No one else spoke. Every eye stayed locked on the screen as the images flickered, one memory after another, each humiliation replayed. The beam of light cut across the dust, sharp, unrelenting. The trap had moved from physical to psychological. They were not watching a film. They were watching themselves. The projector clicked once more, louder than before. The reel spun. The label on the metal can was visible for an instant, projected in the corner, final screening. The words burned against the white canvas, then disappeared. The audience froze. They sat still, their breaths shallow, the weight of the room pressing in on them. The popcorn lay scattered. The soda seeped into the carpet. The exit signs remained dark. The hum of the machine above was steady, patient, unbroken. Every seat creaked under tense bodies. The beam did not waver. The trap was set. The film would not end. The cage was now complete, and the screen had become a mirror. The screen glowed white, then cut to black. The reel clicked. A low rumble echoed through the theater speakers. It was not part of a soundtrack. It was blunt, metallic, steady, like the sound of a hammer striking steel. The crowd stiffened. No one moved at first. Then someone rose, heading toward the side aisle. His shoes scraped against the sticky floor, the sound sharp in the silence. Others followed. The smell of stale soda and old fabric thickened as bodies pressed together, voices rising, nervous, clipped. The group divided. Half moved toward the lobby doors, half toward the emergency exit in the back. Their shadows stretched long against the blank screen. The air felt heavier, cooler, as if the room itself had dropped a degree. A faint draft came from the side corridor, carrying dust and the metallic tang of rusted hinges. A man pushed through, leading the way down the narrow hall. The light overhead flickered once, then cut out. The hall fell into black, feet scuffed. A woman reached for the wall, her palm dragging against chipped paint. Then a sharp snap. A wire, stretched across the passage, caught her at the knees. She fell forward, the sound of her body striking tile, echoing like a gunshot. Her cry filled the corridor. Gasps followed. Someone leaned down to help her. On the screen behind them, light flickered again. A grainy clip appeared, years old. The same woman standing with friends, pointing, laughing at a man hunched over a broken reel. Her voice on tape, distorted but clear. "He can't even do his job." The audience in the footage laughed. The current audience froze. The timing was exact. The group recoiled. Panic spread through whispers and fast breaths. They turned to retreat, but the hall had grown smaller, darker. Another tried to move forward, his hand raised high, reaching. A shelf toppled without warning. Wooden boards crashed, cans clattered across the floor, the sound amplified in the confined space. Dust rose thick, choking. The man stumbled, covering his face. On the screen, another clip, his younger self clapping as the projectionist was scolded. The faces matched. The trap was not only physical, it was memory replayed, punishment projected. In the main hall, the couple tried the front doors again. They pulled at the handles until their knuckles whitened. Nothing gave. The sound of their breathing filled the space, ragged, desperate. The girl cried, her voice thin, sharp against the silence. Her mother whispered, it's fine, though nothing was fine. The screen cut again, showing the manager, his arm raised, his finger pointed, his mouth open mid-shout. Tonight he stood in the aisle, his tie loose, his face pale. He shifted backward, colliding with a seat. The impact echoed. The screen froze on his face, enlarged, mocking in silence. The hammer sound boomed again through the speakers, deeper now, slower. The walls shook with each strike. The audience clutched their ears. The smell of burning dust drifted from the booth above. The heat of the lamp grew faint but noticeable, prickling against the skin. The trap had moved beyond the physical barriers. It was rhythm, image, echo, and dread. The young men at the back tried climbing over seats. Their sneakers slipped on the cracked vinyl. One jumped down the aisle, landing hard, his ankle twisting. He shouted once, then collapsed against the floor. The others froze, uncertain. The projector clicked, and there he was, a boy again, shouting, "Old fool." Across the lobby, the laughter of his friends filling the background. His voice played through the speakers now, distorted, stretched. The man on the floor groaned. His friends pulled at him, dragging him toward the wall. No one laughed. The old teacher sat still, unmoving, his eyes locked on the screen. His notebook lay on the floor, pages open, blank lines visible in the glow. He did not rise. He only stared as the footage rolled. Students in a classroom, a young man struggling at the front, stuttering while the crowd laughed. Among them, the teacher's younger self smiled, silent but complicit. The screen froze. The old man lowered his head. His shoulders sank. The woman in the front row clutched her arms tighter. Her face shone in the projection light. Her clip returned again, her voice sharp, her laughter cruel. The present version of her turned rigid, her lips pressed tight. Her foot tapped against the floor, rapid, uneven. She turned to the aisle, searching for an exit that wasn't there. The smell of sweat rose from the crowd, mixed with popcorn staleness and damp carpet. A crash sounded near the emergency exit. Someone had hurled their body against the door. The frame rattled but held. They tried again, shoulder slamming into the wood, then a third time. Each strike echoed like the hammer through the speakers. The door stayed sealed. The pounding in the sound system grew louder, matching their rhythm, mocking it. The screen cut once more. Faces enlarged, eyes wide, laughter frozen in time. Every humiliation catalogued, projected, undeniable. The audience split further. Some pressed toward the walls, hands trailing along paint and rust. Others clustered near the center, close to the screen, as if proximity would protect them. The girl whimpered again. The mother pulled her tighter, rocking. Her eyes scanned the room, desperate, but the exits were gone. The projection light buzzed. The reel spun. Dust swirled in the beam like ash in air. The hammer sound slowed. Each blow came heavier, longer. The building seemed to breathe between strikes. The floor vibrated under each seat. The crowd shuddered with it. No one spoke now. Their voices were gone, replaced by the machine's rhythm, the machine's memory. The trap was working in silence as much as in sound. One of the young men tried again, running down the aisle. His shoe caught on wire stretched low across the floor. He pitched forward, hitting hard. His body sprawled across the carpet. The projector clicked and another clip filled the screen. His face, younger, laughing, phone in hand, filming a man eating alone. The freeze frame locked on his grin. The current version groaned, clutching his knee. The others backed away from him, eyes wide. The theater smelled now of panic. Sweat, soda, dust, and something sharp from the wiring above. The heat rose with the lamp pressing against skin, drying mouths. Breaths came faster, louder, a collective gasp moving from row to row. The machine above clicked again. The reel shifted. A blank frame filled the screen. Then one word in shaky handwriting appeared, scrawled across film. Remember. The audience froze. No one moved. Their bodies stilled, their eyes locked forward. The word lingered, black on white, projected across their faces. The projector hummed steady. The hammer fell silent. The hall held its breath. The trap had entered its final phase. The maze was not in the aisles but in their memories. At 8 p.m. the theater had dissolved into fragments of panic. Some pressed against the doors, others crouched between seats. A small group pulled toward the side wall, searching for any break in the structure. Their palms slid along plaster cracked and damp. Their fingers caught on seams in the wood, places patched long ago. One man pressed harder. A panel shifted. The edge groaned, the sound lost under the low hum of the projector above. The man shoved again. The wood gave way with a hollow snap. A cold draft pushed through the gap. The air carried a different smell, sharp, chemical, metallic. Without hesitation, they pulled at the panel until it fell outward, exposing a narrow passage that dipped into shadow. The girl's mother refused to move. She pulled her daughter closer. Others joined the man, ducking inside, their shoulders scraping the sides. The corridor was tight, lined with old insulation that flaked against their clothes. The floor was concrete, slick in patches, cold under their shoes. Their breaths came faster, echoing against the walls. The smell grew stronger as they advanced. It was not dust. It was not mold. It was freezer air. At the end of the passage, a steel door waited. Its handle was worn smooth, rust gathered in its creases. One man tugged. It stuck. He pulled again, harder. The metal shrieked. On the third pull, the door broke its seal with a hiss. A cloud of white vapor spilled into the hall, biting against their faces, cutting into their lungs. They coughed, covering their mouths with sleeves. The cold wrapped around them, seeping into fabric, chilling skin instantly. Inside was a room, lined with panels of dented metal. Frost clung to every corner. The light above flickered, pale, weak, revealing outlines stacked in the far end. Shapes under thin sheets, boxes iced over. The group stepped closer. One man lifted a corner of fabric. Beneath lay a hand. Pale, stiff, the skin waxy and stretched, the fingers curled unnaturally tight. The arm traced back to a body, dressed in clothes long out of season. Someone stumbled backward, slamming against the wall. Another reached out and pulled away a second cover. A woman's face appeared, frozen mid-expression, her eyes closed, her mouth caught between speech and silence. The strands of her hair were stiff, clumped with frost. She wore a blouse torn at the sleeve, the fabric hardened into icy folds. More sheets were pulled back, more bodies revealed. A man with a worker's badge still clipped to his collar. A young girl no older than 16, her sweater stiff, her lips blue. A mechanic in uniform, his tools still clipped to his belt. All of them preserved, stored like artifacts rather than corpses. Their outlines blurred under frost, their names known to the town but lost to the years. Gasps echoed. One person retched against the floor. Their breaths fogged instantly in the frigid air. The group huddled together, retreating toward the door. Behind them the steel clanged shut without a touch. The noise reverberated, deep, final. The freezer hummed around them, steady, alive. The realization landed. The missing were never gone, they had been here all along. On the screen in the main hall, the film shifted again. Footage of faces long reported missing appeared. Each face matched the bodies in the freezer. Smiles in daylight, laughter in kitchens, walking home on gray afternoons. The audience remaining in the hall froze, their eyes darting from screen to doors. The trap had widened. Past and present overlapped. The list extended further than anyone had guessed. The group in the freezer pounded on the steel door. Their fists left white marks against the frost. Their voices cracked, muffled by the hum. The air grew heavier, their skin burned from the cold. Finally the handle jerked. The panel gave. They spilled back into the narrow passage, scrambling, shoving. They stumbled into the theater again, their faces white with frost, their eyes wide, their breaths shallow. They were not the only ones to find something hidden. Another set of patrons, pressed against the far side of the theater, discovered a different panel. This one behind the faded velvet curtain that sagged against the wall. They pulled it aside, revealing a narrow staircase climbing upward. The air smelled of oil, hot wires, stale tobacco. They climbed, shoes creaking on each step until they reached a door. It opened into the projection booth. The booth was cramped, lit by the stutter of old bulbs. Dust coated every surface. Along the walls, shelves groaned under the weight of film canisters stacked 3 and 4 deep, hundreds of reels, each one labeled in the same uneven handwriting. Names, dates, incidents. Laughed when I stuttered 1999. Called me useless 2003. Fired me 2007. The handwriting looped shaky across tape that peeled at the edges. One reel had no name, only a single word. Gone. Another read. Mocked in the lobby 2012. Each label was short, functional, but unmistakable. Together they formed a catalog, a library of memory and humiliation. The smell of acetate filled the air, sharp, chemical, suffocating. The reels gleamed under the bulb, silver and endless. In the corner of the booth sat a corkboard. Notes were pinned in crooked rows. Polaroids of faces, some familiar, some long vanished. Receipts circled in ink, pieces of fabric tacked beside names. Small tokens, meaningless alone, but together they built a map of grievance. Each pin connected by red thread to a reel on the shelf. The system was obsessive, exact. At the center of the room was the projector. Its gears clattered steadily, the sound harsh in the tight space. The reel spinning through it was marked in bold letters, "Final Screening." The frames clicked past, one by one, feeding the story below. On the screen in the main hall, the exact events of the night appeared. Every fall, every gasp, every desperate shove was already recorded, already edited. The audience watched themselves not live but preordained. The footage had been cut together long before they arrived. One man reached toward the running reel. His fingers brushed the spinning tape. The film burned under his touch, blackening instantly. The smell of scorched acetate filled the air. He yanked his hand back, skin singed, the pain sharp. The projector did not stop. It kept feeding frame after frame, its rhythm unbroken. The others turned to the shelves, pulling reels down, scattering them. Some fell, clattering against the floor. The labels flashed as they rolled. Ignored me 2015. Smirked 2001. Forgot my name 1994. Each one represented a memory, preserved, weaponized, stored not for nostalgia but for revenge. A reel slipped underfoot, cracking open. The tape unspooled, spilling across the floor like entrails. The group stepped over it, their shoes catching, dragging strips with them. The hum of the projector drowned their noise. On the screen, the chaos was already there, mirrored perfectly. They were moving inside the script written for them. One of them whispered, "It's already made." The words were clipped, weak, quickly swallowed by the grinding of gears. They understood. Tonight was not unfolding by accident. It was unfolding by design. Every movement, every scream, every fall had been prepared. They were not living through an incident. They were performing in a film already cut together. The heat of the lamp burned hotter. Dust lifted in the beam, turning the booth into haze. Sweat broke along their foreheads, mixing with the chemical smell of film. Their lungs ached with the heavy air. The shelves seemed to close in around them, reels stacked higher, shadows lengthening. In the hall below, the remaining crowd watched the screen replay each humiliation. The projector beam split the dark, unwavering. The soda stain spread wider. The popcorn still lay scattered. The trap was complete. Upstairs, the reel spun faster. The label "Final Screening" blurred as it turned. The sound of film rushing through the teeth of the projector grew louder, harsher, relentless. The group in the booth could not stop it. They could only watch. The film showed their present, but the script was already written. They were only catching up to the memory. At 3 a.m., the first siren cut through the night. The sound bounced off empty storefronts and rain-slick pavement. Patrol cars swerved onto the street, tires spraying water, headlights washing across the old marquee. Signs still flickered, letters broken, half of the word "Tonight" burned out. The doors shook under the first strike of a battering ram. Glass cracked, wood splintered. On the third hit, the locks gave way. Officers poured inside, flashlights stabbing through the dark. The air was heavy with dust and heat. Popcorn lay crushed along the aisles. Soda stains glistened in their beams. The theater seats stood empty, every row intact, as if an audience had vanished between frames. No bodies, no cries, only silence. At the far end the screen glowed bright white. Words bled across the canvas in black letters. Evil is not loud, it's projected. The text lingered still, unwavering. The officers froze. The sound of the projector rolled above them, steady, mechanical. They raised their lights to the booth window. No movement. The hum continued. When they forced the booth door, the chair stood empty. The machine spun without interruption, reels turning, gears grinding. The lamp burned hot, spilling dust and smoke into the confined space. Beside the machine sat the reel marked Final Screening. It was nearly at its end. Walter Hensley was gone. They searched the back rooms. The freezer stood open, frost dripping onto the floor. Bodies lined the wall, stiff, silent, preserved. The cold bit into the officers' faces as they pulled each sheet back. They recognized some of them. A waitress who had vanished in 2015, a mechanic missing since 2010, a young girl reported gone in 2001, reports long filed, never solved. Their faces were there, their clothes frozen in time. The discovery spread through the team, but no one spoke. In the booth the reels still towered, stacked in rows, each marked in the same hand. Forgot My Order 1998. Laughed at Stutter 2004. Closed the Door 2013. Each memory catalogued, preserved. Waiting. A list turned into an archive. A life rewritten in film. On the desk lay the corkboard, pins and threads, receipts circled, scraps of fabric, faces clipped from photographs. The evidence filled the room, but the man himself was missing. Dawn came. The town gathered at the police tape strung across the lot. Faces pale in the weak light, breath visible in the cold air. They whispered among themselves, repeating one sentence again and again. We never saw it. They had walked past him for years, seen him in the diner, in the theater, on the street. They had nodded, perhaps waved, but never looked closer. Now his absence was heavier than his presence had ever been. The investigators carried out the reels one by one. Boxes stacked into vans, labels photographed, dates cross-checked against unsolved cases. The list grew longer with each can pulled from the shelves. The scale widened. The theater became more than a crime scene. It was a record, a museum of slights and insults. Each can a weapon, each note a wound. Reporters arrived. Cameras framed the marquee, the broken doors, the tape fluttering in the wind. Questions were shouted but not answered. Footage of officers carrying body bags spread across morning broadcasts. The town's name appeared on screens nationwide. The word projectionist repeated again and again, paired with ghost, paired with monster, paired with silence. The building was boarded up within weeks. Planks nailed across doors, windows covered in black paint. The marquee taken down, the screen removed, the projector dismantled and locked away. Yet the memory held. The lot stayed empty through winter, weeds pushing up between cracks in the pavement. No one lingered. Children crossed to the other side of the street. Adults quickened their pace when walking past. The space carried a weight, invisible but undeniable. A year later, developers bought the property. Construction crews tore down the old walls, hauled away seats and screens, replaced plaster with glass. By spring, a bar opened in its place. Bright lights, music spilling into the street, new paint, new furniture, soft glow from chandeliers. Tourists stopped in, college students filled the tables, but locals rarely stepped inside. They avoided the building. They looked away when passing. The shape had changed, but the memory had not. Inside the bar, a framed plaque hung near the counter. Small, discreet, easy to miss. It bore no names, no dates, no explanation. Only one line etched in metal. Let this place be a reminder. Most patrons never noticed. Those who did stared a moment longer, unsettled, unable to say why. Stories circulated. A stranger claimed to have seen a shadow moving in the booth window above the bar. Another swore they heard the whir of a projector late at night, faint under the music. A bartender once said she looked up from polishing glasses and caught sight of an old man's outline in the glass, thin, hunched, watching. She blinked and it was gone. No one believed her. No one wanted to. The town carried the memory like frost under skin. Conversation stopped when his name came up. Parents told children to stay clear of the building. Some still blamed themselves, recalling a laugh, a comment, a moment when they had joined the crowd. Others claimed innocence, insisting they never mocked, never shouted. The guilt was collective, but the silence was heavier. The theater no longer stood, but its image remained. A white screen, a hum from above, a locked door that would not give. The reel labeled "Final Screening" still turned in their minds, frame by frame, endless. They did not know where Walter had gone. They only knew the machine had kept running after he disappeared. The truth was never loud. It was silent, patient, projected. And some nights the light still flickered across the glass.